Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to prep for that Forestry Technician interview? We're going to use RoleCatcher's insights today.
Yeah, we'll use those as our guide.
Awesome. We're not just giving you generic advice here.
Nope.
We're diving deep into specific questions and strategies that'll help you really stand out, kind of like your personal interview Sherpas.
That's a good analogy. Like, we're going to climb those interview mountains together. And RoleCatcher is that detailed trail map showing us the best paths to the top.
I like it. Okay, so RoleCatcher's guide says a forestry technician's work is pretty adventurous. Lots of outdoors time, hands-on stuff, and potential for growth.
Right.
But it also mentions it can be physically demanding. You're exposed to the elements, and there are some hazards.
The heat, the cold, the bugs.
Yeah, for sure. So does this still sound like the right fit for you?
I think it's important to know those pros and cons up front before you go for it, especially when you're working with, nature's elements.
Absolutely. So, assuming you're ready for the challenge, let's tackle some of these common interview questions. Okay, first up, can you explain your experience with forest inventory data collection?
Okay.
But what they're really asking is, tell us about your hands-on experience gathering information about the forest.
Yeah, they want to know what you've actually done out in the field.
Exactly. RoleCatcher's Insights section suggests using specific examples.
Show, don't tell.
Yeah. Instead of just saying, I'm familiar with data collection, talk about a specific time when you actually did it. What tools or software did you use? What were some challenges you faced, and how'd you overcome them?
Right. Like, did you use any GPS or GIS software to map out maybe forest stands? Talk about that process, the tech, and what you learned from the data.
They want to see that you can actually walk the walk, right?
For sure.
And don't forget to mention teamwork.
Yeah.
Forestry often involves collaboration, so highlighting your teamwork experience is a big plus.
Huge plus.
Now, imagine the interviewer follows up with, what kind of data did you collect during your inventory, and how did you ensure its accuracy? You got to be ready to dive into those details.
Definitely. They're testing your understanding here. Did you collect, tree species, diameter, height, health? How did you verify those measurements and ensure everything's accurate?
And RoleCatcher's guide warns about being too vague. So instead of general statements, stick to concrete examples and actual results whenever possible.
Right. Instead of saying, I collected a lot of data, you could say something like, I surveyed 100 acres, collected data on over 500 trees, and my measurements were within a 5% margin of error.
That's a much stronger statement, right?
Okay.
Okay, moving on to question 2. How do you ensure safety in the field when conducting forest management activities? This is a big one.
Huge. They're checking if you're aware of safety procedures and committed to keeping everyone safe, including yourself.
Yeah. They want to see that you understand the potential hazards of the job and are serious about safety protocols.
Absolutely.
RoleCatcher suggests focusing on PPE, communication procedures, and emergency response plans. So think of a real-life situation where you had to implement these protocols. What did you do?
Okay, let's say you're part of a team doing a control burn. You could talk about wearing fire-resistant clothing, keeping communication clear, and having an escape route planned just in case.
That's a great example. And it's not just about listing the equipment.
Right.
Explain how you use ED and why it matters. Talk about specific safety procedures like site assessments or identifying potential hazards. They want to see you're proactive, not reactive.
Definitely proactive.
Now imagine they hit you with, can you describe a time when a coworker raised a safety concern? How did you handle it?
Oh, that's a good one. That's really about handling a tough situation, communicating effectively, and making safety a priority. Did you listen to them, investigate the issue, take action to fix it? They want to see your leadership in action.
RoleCatcher's Avoid section is all about appearing safety conscious. Don't downplay risks or seem indifferent to safety protocols.
Yeah, it's really showing your commitment to a safe working environment for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, before we hit the next question, let's weave in some career insights from RoleCatcher's guide. One thing that popped out to me was the increasing use of technology in forestry, like drones.
Drones are everywhere now. They're being used for aerial surveys, forest inventory, monitoring wildlife, and even assessing fire damage.
It's mind-blowing.
It's a whole new era in forestry.
And it's not just drones. GIS and mapping software are getting super advanced, giving foresters powerful tools for data analysis and decision-making. So even if you don't have direct experience with these technologies yet, showing that you're interested and willing to learn makes a good impression.
Definitely. It shows you can adapt.
Right. Adaptability is key. Okay, back to those interview questions. Question 3. Can you describe your experience with forest fire management? Now, even if you haven't been on the front lines fighting wildfires, you can still talk about your knowledge of fire behavior, prevention, and suppression. Have you ever done controlled burns, fire drills, community outreach?
Those are all relevant.
Yeah, RoleCatcher's approach section suggests highlighting how fire behavior influences management decisions.
Right, like maybe talk about how you've analyzed fuel loads and weather patterns to assess fire risk, or how you've helped with fuel reduction projects to, minimize the spread of those wildfires.
And imagine the interviewer asks, you're leading a crew on a prescribed burn. What are the key safety considerations? How would you answer that?
Well, first off, clear communication and coordination are vital. Then you'd need a solid burn plan, communication protocols, escape routes, emergency procedures. Got to be ready for anything. And of course, we'd be closely monitoring the weather and adjusting the plan if needed.
That shows you can think on your feet. And it ties back to that earlier question about safety. It's all about prioritizing the well-being of the team.
Exactly.
Now, before question 4, let's touch on career advancement. RoleCatcher's guide highlights that forestry technicians have a lot of growth paths, like becoming a forest manager or specializing in areas like environmental protection or resource conservation.
Right, and they really stress continuous learning.
Yeah.
Pursuing certifications, like certified forester or certified wildlife biologist, can really boost your career. Shows you're dedicated.
It's like an investment in yourself, right? Okay, back to the questions. Question 4. How do you identify and assess forest health issues? This is where your inner forest detective comes out.
It's all about using your knowledge of forest ecology to spot the subtle signs of trouble, whether it's an insect infestation, a disease, or stress from the environment. I want to see that you can recognize those symptoms and figure out how bad the problem is.
RoleCatcher suggests using techniques like visual observations, sampling, and lab analysis. So think back to a time you had to investigate a potential forest health issue. What steps did you take?
Okay. Let's say you notice some trees with weird discoloration or their leaves are falling off. You could collect samples, maybe some leaves or bark for lab analysis, see if it's a disease or pests. And you could also look at the surroundings for clues, like drought stress or maybe some recent logging activity.
And they might follow up with, describe a time you encountered a significant forest health issue. What steps did you take? So be ready to walk them through your process.
Yep, from figuring out the problem to treating it or finding ways to reduce its impact.
Exactly. Did you consult experts? Did you implement a treatment plan? Monitor the situation? They want to see you taking action.
Action is key.
Okay, question 5 is all about planning. How do you prioritize and plan forest management activities? Now, this really gets into project management and making decisions.
It's about showing you can manage a lot of tasks, use resources wisely, and make strategic decisions that fit the overall management goals.
They want to see that you're organized, efficient, and can handle those complex projects. RoleCatcher suggests highlighting your ability to assess resources, identify constraints, and communicate with stakeholders.
Right. Like maybe you could talk about a time when you had to develop a work plan for a forest restoration project. Did you have to, prioritize tasks based on budget or the time of year? Did you need to get permits or funding?
All those real-world scenarios. Now, what if they ask, imagine you need to develop a forest management plan for a newly acquired property. What are the key steps?
First, gather all the information you can about the property. Size, topography, soil, vegetation, any ecological or cultural stuff. Then a thorough site assessment. You'd want to identify any potential issues or, opportunities. And consulting with experts and stakeholders is crucial.
To make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
And don't forget those communication skills.
So important.
Keeping everyone informed is vital in forestry.
Absolutely.
Okay, before the next question, let's touch on how RoleCatcher's AI can help you tailor your answers and get feedback for this job. Have you explored that at all?
Their AI is amazing. It can analyze the job description and suggest, keywords and phrases that'll resonate with the hiring manager.
It's like a secret weapon for making sure your answers hit the mark.
It is, and it can analyze your practice answers, too.
Really?
Yeah, it identifies areas to improve, clarity, being concise, things like that.
And that's amazing. That's like having a personal interview coach right in your pocket. Okay, moving on. Question 6. Can you describe your experience with GIS and mapping software? This is a technical one, but don't be intimidated.
It's really about being comfortable with tech and using GIS to support those forest management decisions.
Exactly. Have you created maps? Analyze data. Use GIS in the field.
Mm.
RoleCatcher suggests mentioning specific projects. For instance, have you created a forest inventory map, analyzed wildfire risk, or planned timber harvesting operations using GIS?
And don't shy away from getting a little technical,
Yeah.
mention specific software you're good at like ArcGIS or QGIS, and talk about how you've used those geospatial data analysis techniques in real-world situations.
Love it. Now imagine they really want to test your GIS knowledge. Imagine you're tasked with creating a map to identify areas perfect for reforestation. What data layers would you use and why?
That's a good one. I'd think about things like soil type, elevation, slope, which direction it faces, and how close it is to water. Then use GIS to overlay these layers and pinpoint those areas that are ideal for reforestation.
It's all about using GIS to solve those real-world problems.
Absolutely.
And even if your GIS skills are still developing, show your enthusiasm for learning and highlight your understanding of its applications in forestry.
Right.
Okay, before our final question for this part, let's go back to RoleCatcher's insights on industry trends. They talk about a growing emphasis on sustainable forestry practices. What are your thoughts on that?
It's awesome to see the industry becoming more holistic, recognizing the ecological, economic, and social aspects of forest management.
It's not just about timber production anymore.
Right. It's about that long-term health of the forest.
And showing the interviewer that you're on top of these trends and committed to sustainability is huge.
Definitely.
Okay, final question. How do you incorporate ecological considerations into forest management activities?
All right, time to shine.
This is where you really show your understanding of those ecological principles and your dedication to protecting the environment.
Yep.
RoleCatcher suggests discussing things like biodiversity, wildlife habitat, and watershed protection. Have you ever done a wildlife survey? Or maybe assess the impact of logging on water quality?
Those are great examples.
Yeah, those experiences really highlight your commitment to keeping the ecosystem healthy.
For sure. Let's say you were involved in a timber harvest near a stream. You could explain how you use buffer zones to protect water quality, did selective logging to minimize disrupting the habitat, and kept an eye on wildlife to assess the impact.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now imagine they follow up with, we need to increase timber production, but there's a rare woodpecker in the area. How would you approach this?
That's a tough one. Foresters often have to juggle these competing demands. I'd advocate for a really thorough assessment, looking at the potential impacts on those woodpeckers, their habitat, food sources, and how sensitive they are to disruptions.
Good point.
Then I'd suggest alternative harvesting strategies that minimize those impacts, like maybe limit operations during nesting season, avoid their core habitat, or use different logging techniques.
It's all about showing them you can think critically and balance those ecological and economic goals.
You got it.
And that wraps up part 1 of our deep dive.
We'll be back for more.
We'll be back for part 2, where we'll tackle even more questions and dig deeper into those strategies for showing off your skills and passion. Stay tuned.
Can't wait. We're back for more deep dive action, gearing up to nail that forestry technician interview.
You got it. Part 2, let's go. This time, we're going beyond just knowing the info.
Right.
We're focusing on how to really apply that knowledge in the real world.
Because they want to see how you think, not just what you know.
Okay, so let's jump into a question that kind of builds on what we talked about before. How do you incorporate ecological considerations into your forest management activities?
This question really gets to the heart of it.
It does. It's about being a responsible steward of the forest, not just following the rules. Understanding that whole ecosystem and making choices that are good for both the environment and the people who rely on it.
It's about that balance, right?
So let's say you're planning a timber harvest in a spot with sensitive wildlife habitat. How would you approach that to, minimize the impact?
Okay, well, I'd start with a really thorough assessment of the area, looking for any critical habitats, sensitive species, things like that. Then I'd explore different harvesting techniques to minimize disturbance, like selective logging or reducing the size of clear cuts.
So you're not just saying, I'd protect the habitat, you're giving them actions.
Right. I want to make it clear what I would do.
Now imagine they throw this at you. We're under pressure to increase timber production, but there's a rare plant in this area. How would you handle that?
That's a tricky situation. First, I'd need all the info I could get about that plant, its habitat, and how sensitive it is to being disturbed. I'd probably also talk to some experts, like maybe a botanist or ecologist.
Smart move, bringing in the specialists.
You need the right people on your side. Then I'd explore options to lessen the impact. Maybe change harvesting techniques, move the location, adjust the timing, even set aside some areas for conservation.
Showing you can think outside the box.
Mind you.
Okay, let's move on to another one. How do you monitor and evaluate the success of forest management activities?
This is about using data to make sure what you're doing is actually working.
Not just doing the work, but measuring the results.
Exactly. RoleCatcher suggests focusing on things you can actually measure. So let's say it's a reforestation project. What data would you look at to track its progress?
Okay, so for that, I'd be tracking things like seedling survival rates, how fast the trees are growing, species diversity, and if there are any invasive species popping up. Good point. That would tell me if the plan's working or if we need to adjust anything.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to mention your data skills too, like spreadsheets, software, or GIS.
All right, follow-up time. You've been watching a forest stand for a few years, and now the data shows tree growth is declining. What might you investigate, and how would you find solutions?
Investigation time. I'd start with the environment, precipitation, temperatures, soil nutrients. Has anything changed there? Then I'd check for signs of insects, diseases, or maybe invasive species are taking over.
So many possibilities.
Right, and depending on what I find, I might do some soil tests, look at the weather patterns, or even consult with experts on tree diseases or bugs.
Shows that you're proactive and know how to use those resources.
It's all about finding answers, right?
Before the next question, let's go back to RoleCatcher's AI for a sec. It's not just about practicing your answers. It can help you research the company, too.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. It can give you insights into their values, their mission, their projects. That helps you tailor your answers to match their goals.
It's like having a research team working for you.
Right. Okay, let's talk about a question that can sometimes be tricky. Can you describe your experience with timber sales and harvesting?
Okay, so this one might not apply to every forestry technician role,
Right.
but if it's a key part of the job you're after, you've got to be ready to talk about it. It's not just about knowing how to cut down trees. It's about understanding sustainable forest management, making sure that harvesting benefits both the environment and the economy.
Exactly. RoleCatcher suggests mentioning different harvesting methods: clear cutting, selective logging, seed tree, shelter wood. Have you worked with any of those?
I've got some experience with shelterwood harvesting, actually. Worked on a project to regenerate Douglas fir. That method removes some of the mature trees to make space for the seedlings, but leaves enough for shade and protection.
That's a great example. You're really painting a picture for them.
Trying to. Okay, now for the curveball. Imagine you need to create a timber harvesting plan for a forest hit hard by insects. How do you balance the economic and ecological goals?
Okay, so that's where things get complex. First, I'd assess the damage and figure out where salvage logging might be necessary.
Got to recover some value from those trees, right?
Makes sense? But what about the ecological side?
Of course. I'd also have to consider those long-term impacts. Soil disturbance, habitat fragmentation, even the spread of invasive species.
You're thinking about all the pieces of the puzzle.
I'd want to promote natural regeneration, protect sensitive areas, and make sure we're not setting ourselves up for more outbreaks in the future.
It's all about finding those sustainable solutions.
Absolutely. Solutions that work for everyone.
Okay, before we wrap up part 2, let's revisit asking good questions at the end of the interview.
Oh, that's so important. It shows you're engaged and curious.
And it helps you figure out if the job is really a good fit for you.
Right. So instead of the usual salary questions, have a few prepared that show you've done your homework. Like, ask about their current projects, their sustainability efforts, or their future plans. Good ones. I've also heard it's smart to jot down some notes during the interview if something sparks your interest. Then you can ask a follow-up question. Shows you were paying attention.
That's a great tip.
Okay, get ready for part 3, where we'll dive into some advanced strategies to showcase your personality and passion. We're back. Final part of our Forestry Technician interview prep.
Time to polish those answers. Make them really shine.
We've covered the technical stuff, the problem solving, the whole ecology angle.
Now it's about you. Adding that confidence, letting your personality come through. Got to connect with the interviewer, on a personal level.
Okay, so how do we do that? What are the, secrets to leaving a good impression?
Let me tell you about STAR stories. Situation, task, action, result. It's a way to structure your answers, tell a little story that shows off your skills and experience.
So instead of just saying, I'm a good communicator, you tell a story.
Right. Like maybe a time you had to deal with a conflict on your team. Explain the situation, what your role was, what you did, and how it turned out.
Makes it more real, more memorable. And I think this is where RoleCatcher's AI can be really helpful. They have that whole section on crafting these stories.
Oh, yeah. Their AI can analyze your resume, pick out potential star moments, and even help you structure them. It's like having a coach, but for storytelling.
Awesome. So, stories, check. What else should we be thinking about in this final prep stage?
Nonverbal communication. It's crazy how much your body language, eye contact, your tone of voice, all that can affect how the interviewer sees you.
It's true. We get so focused on what we're saying that we forget about all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Any tips for nailing the nonverbals?
Practice, practice, practice. Do mock interviews, record yourself answering questions. RoleCatcher even has that AI-powered video analysis.
I've heard about that.
It's like having a virtual coach giving you pointers on your posture, eye contact, all that.
That's so cool. And don't forget, enthusiasm is contagious. If you're genuinely pumped about forestry, let it show.
It makes a difference.
Okay, last few minutes of the interview, they ask, do you have any questions for us? This is not the time to just say, nope, I'm good.
Oh, definitely not. It's your chance to show you've done your research, you're interested, you're thinking about this job in this company.
So what kinds of questions should we be asking?
Have a few ready beforehand that go beyond the basic stuff. You could ask about their current projects, their sustainability practices, their plans for the future, things like that.
I also think it's a good idea to take notes during the interview, jot down things that spark your interest. Then you can ask a follow-up question, show you were really listening.
That's a good point. Shows you're engaged.
Okay, star stories, nonverbals, asking good questions. Any final advice for our listener before they head into that interview?
Remember why you're there. You love forestry, you have the skills, you're ready to make a difference. Let that passion show, be yourself, and trust that you've prepared well.
Love that. And one more thing from RoleCatcher. They mentioned certifications, like certified forester, certified wildlife biologist, stuff like that.
Those certifications can really help you stand out. Shows you're committed to growing your expertise, like a stamp of approval.
All right, to our listener out there prepping for their interview, we're rooting for you. Go get them.
Good luck.
And that wraps up our deep dive into forestry technician interview prep. We hope this has helped, and best of luck in your job search.
And remember, keep learning, keep growing throughout your forestry career.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time.